Everybody, welcome inside the Paris Sea Palace, high above 3773 East Broadway. This is a live edition of the Jake Feinberg Show, coming to you on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today. And as I continue to traverse the musical landscape of our cultural heritage, it is such a high honor to bring in a cat. So many people in music play these unsung roles, and they play these roles of helping other people when they're down, pulling them up by their bootstraps, and recognizing that they themselves might have very well been a product of the society we live in, and they've reaped the benefits of that society, and they recognize true genius and equal rights and all, and they try to give back to humanity by giving other people opportunities to create on the bandstand or in the studio. And I believe that's what my guest has exuded for, his whole career, and we'll get a chance to explore it today. Ned Albright, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, Jake. How are you?
Great to hear you, man.
I'm
been
glad to be on with you. We've been trying to do this for a while, and now we're finally going to do it. So let's have at it.
Oh man, just because it's something that I've been operating on the spirit level for so long, Ned, and I've surrounded myself. My children are multi-ethnic. All my friends they're all different colors. They're older and younger. I've started my show 10 years ago, interviewing my elders about a lot of these sociological issues, like Richard Davis and Jack DeJohnette, and ultimately guys like, did you recognize at a certain point that we were all one, that we are all one human race, and the fact that on the thinking level, racism exists only at that level?
Oh, yeah. I recognized early on, and I'll tell you a funny, quick story. When I was a kid, all I really wanted to be was an athlete. And I played, team sports. I was a typical American kid. I played baseball, basketball, and football. And I was on a basketball team in my town, and there were two African-American kids who were also named Albright. And so when they announced the starting five, and they'd say, here's Ned Albright and then Frankie and Randy Albright, and the opposing teams would invariably joke at us about, are we brothers, are we cousins or whatever. And I always thought, yeah, we're brothers. I have been lucky to be kind of colorblind, except, obviously recognizing the differences in people, but just always feeling like, we are all the same, man. We're all the same, and we're all, when it's best is when we work together.
Sports and music seem to fuse that more than anything. Do you believe that where you grew up and the kind of town you grew up in, do you believe that we were a little bit more connected as a human species? I just did my second interview with the vibist Mike Mainieri, and that cat was born in 1938, and he was talking about. He said there was an article in the New York Times about this about 2 weeks ago, and the Sicilian family, and the title was "When Italians Became White," and it was the idea that there were people there. It's just interesting, the evolution of this whole thing about people of color, because it was like the Slavs, the Greeks, and the Italians and the Jews, when they came over here, the Immigration Act of 1924, they were actually considered people of color. no one would ever try to, step in the shoes of people with black skin, but it just seemed the neighborhoods and the equality was such that we were more connected as a species, as a human race, and the division has cropped up larger and larger over time. And I just wonder if you were always surrounded by people, if you were more connected to us as one human race, as opposed to, this sort of, slicing and dicing of different people based on their skin color.
Yeah, that's a really interesting topic, and we could go on and on about it. My immediate reaction to that is, I was born in 1950, and when I was growing up, I saw the, what they would call race riots and things like that, but they were happening in other parts of the country, and it didn't really. It almost seemed surreal to me to see the violence that was going on with fire hoses and dogs and all this kind of stuff. But, in regards to all the different ethnic groups, when, I was, I think, kind of lucky in a certain way in my town. I think we had, one or two of everything. And I grew up, my best friends were Sicilian, Italian, and, I think their father and mother had grown up in, and their grandparents had grown up as immigrants, being what you say, also Jewish guys in our neighborhood. There was a lot of, crazy history, with the Jews going back to the beginning of time.
I'll let you keep going, but Maynard, great-grandmother, they lived in tenements, almost unlivable tenements in the Bronx, but his great-grandmother used to say to him, watch out for those white guys. And those were like the Irish Catholics, and it was just the German, It's an interesting evolution, but it was clear that, if your name was Goldberg, you weren't getting into, the Puerto Ricans, the Jews, and the Italians were definitely lower status than white people at a certain time.
No doubt, and they were ostracized, but also they were essential.
Exactly.
We talk about essential workers now.
Those are musicians, by the way. Musicians are essential workers.
Well, certainly musicians are essential workers, but the Italians that I knew were building Manhattan. Their forefathers, their people.
Absolutely, dude. Absolutely.
They knew how to build, and they built a lot of Manhattan. A lot of those skyscrapers were put up with immigrant labor from all of the places you named. And they although ostracized and also kind of the groups seem to live in for those white guys. Watch out for those black guys. Watch out for those Jews. Watch out for those whatever, Mexicans, Puerto Ricans. I feel lucky and blessed in my life that since I was a kid, and then moving into, I lived in a small town outside of Manhattan, and but we moved in. My family moved in. My dad was a madman, and
that's good. That's a good thing.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Oh, freaking love this stuff, man.
Oh yeah, so we moved into Manhattan.
Where do you live in Vernon or something? Where did you live?
I lived in Bedford Village, New York.
Okay, so I'm just for the record, I'm a Stony Brook cat, Long Island. So I'm out in Tucson. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. So we're from the same basic locale.
Right.
My town, when I was growing up, was basically a commuter town with little housing projects to house housing areas to house everybody. It's now a very Tony place, and I will tell you that the house I grew up in, my dad bought for $10,000 in 1950. The last time it was sold, which was about probably 10 years ago, it sold for $2.2 million. So that lets you know what happened in that town. It became a very Tony place.
Anyway, real gentrified.
And those were sort of my first musical experiences were in that town. I was, about maybe 12 years old. My grandmother, I was already fooling around with the guitar. I had grown up playing trumpet and French horn in the school band and orchestra. And then I got interested in, pop music. And I think I bought my first record. And just to show about diversity, the first three records, I bought them all at once. I went into the music store and I bought, three records. One was Little Richard, Tutti Frutti. One was Gene Vincent, Bebop-A-Lula. And the other was Honeycomb by Jimmy Rogers.
Oh, man.
So they were all different styles, what we would now call different genres of music.
Absolutely.
But I loved all of them, and they all had crossover hits, so they were all kind of in my little AM radio world. And so, I feel lucky that I had, that kind of exposure. I fell asleep every night with an AM radio that I had built, a little portable transistor or whatever, and I had it under my pillow, and I would listen to everybody, and a lot of times at night you'd get bounce, the radio waves would bounce, so I'd get Nashville, and sometimes I'd get Texas, and so I was exposed to a lot of different kinds of really cool music at an early age.
Yeah, they called those bleed through channels. That's magical.
Yeah, it was magical because you couldn't find them. You just sort of had to.
It's just magic. It just happened at a random time. You're getting all of a sudden, Randy's record shop or something, or whatever. Whether it's Calvin Keyes or Chester Thompson, all these, even guys that grew up in Oklahoma City, or Tulsa, they'd be getting stations out of New Orleans. There was Ned, here's this is where the rubber meets the road. It is like, did you it's almost unfathomable to me to know that, I know you were just kind of a young cat, you were a young boy at this time, but, Neri told me that at Birdland, Buddy Rich never wanted to play the last set of the night during the week if he could help it. And at a certain point, this was when Philly Joe was really hurting, really junked out, and he was hard up for work, and so Buddy hired him as a drum tech, and then he let him play the last set, and sometimes Max Roach would play the last set, whatever, but Blakey went through a really hard time. It's funny because I've interviewed guys like Denny Sywell, who was the Wings' first drummer with Paul McCartney. He was a jazzer through and through, and he went to Pookie's Pub one night, and it was after Train passed, but it was basically Elvin and McCoy, and it was the band, and the paint's peeling off the walls. They go to intermission, and Denny's being incredibly complimentary to Elvin. He's like, "Hey man, nobody's here. Can I play?" And Elvin's like, he didn't say anything. And then midway through the second set, Elvin just takes the drumsticks, gives them to Denny. Denny plays a tune. Afterwards, they're outside smoking a joint. Elvin's like, "You can play, he's like, "You're amazing." And then down the street comes this bum, and Denny's is big, and Denny's getting worried, and Elvin's not even seems concerned at all, and Elvin starts talking to this bum. He's like, "Hey man, this cat can freaking play," and that bum was Art Blakey. And it's like, when was the first time that you recognized the genius of these masters and the fact that Dizzy was strict, he smoked a lot of weed, but stayed pretty straight. I mean, some of the guys were very successful almost at a commercial level, but did you recognize, even through the music and the musicians, the ultimate struggle that we've just been talking about here for the last 15 minutes?
Absolutely, absolutely. I will say this. Again, my good fortune, I was exposed to, different scenes. And in the beginning, when I had the transistor radio on underneath, and I was listening to, the Four Seasons and Del Shannon and all the things coming out of Tin Pan Alley. I dreamed about being with those kind of people, and sure enough, I wound up, doing stints at, with different writing groups in 1650 Broadway and the Brill Building, and later on with Jeff Barry. I kind of took it for granted at that time. It was really super exciting, but that was the kind of stuff that was going on. But with the jazz guys, that was another level to me, and still remains another level.
Tell me about that level, man. I was born in '78, so I really want you to tell me about that level.
Well, I will tell you that I worked for a solid year and lived in New Orleans, and I worked for a guy named Allan Toussaint. And Allan was sort of like a father figure and a mentor for me. And he would say to me, you listen to Oscar Peterson.
Oh,
and
God,
so I'd
this
listen
is
to
so
Oscar
sick.
Peterson.
Holy
shit, I'll never play like that.
Wait, what year was this?
That was in 1975.
You really couldn't have picked a better time to be. I mean, anyway, I'm sorry to cut you off. So go ahead. He was hipping you to other cats.
No, I was just say, I was living in New York, so I was exposed to jazz in high school. We used to walk by the Metropole Cafe, and I'd hear Dizzy Gillespie. Like, I'd look in, because I couldn't go in. I wasn't illegal to go in, but the doors were open, and they were kind of playing music to draw people into the place. I'd stand outside and watch Dizzy Gillespie and watch different guys of that kind of level, and I never really. Only looking back do I really appreciate it. But even back then, when you hear people like that play, you just go, holy shit.
Yeah, this is so fantastic. I mean, just hold on. I mean, you were, because the Metropole, I know that's where, like, I know Felix Cavallari's wife, that's where he discovered Dino Danelli. I also know that it was a Dixieland place. I mean, but were you, here's the point. When I, this is the thing. I've done several interviews with Gary Bartz, and I'm not sure how old you were in the mid 60s, but essentially what he said to me, and I think it's pretty on point, if you look at the tenor of the music, is that they pretty much, he said, they pretty much left us alone in through the 60s, and then all the leaders of kind of social justice movements, consciousness, political movements were murdered. Right, towards the late 60s. So there was this like magical time, this birth of the cool time, and there's also Train's modal period, but yet a lot of white patrons and women were saying make him stop, but still they were just like they were almost anonymous, and then all of a sudden they made too much progress in the minds of the powers that be, and the leaders started to get murdered and shot. And I'm just trying to figure out from someone who came up, I think you used the right word, almost colorblind. Where were you in obviously before Toussaint? I mean, mid 60s, and then like around that time, like it fundamentally, it just was amazing to me that Bartz basically said they left us alone. That sounds to me like America. I mean, whatever that means, that sounds like America to me. And I just wanted you to find out where you were at that time.
Well, I'll tell you. So in 1962, I was 12 years old, and that's when I started to fool around with guitar and I was listening to stuff. By 1960, I want to say 1965. I think, yeah, I'm sure it was 1965.
Yeah.
So in 1965, I had my first record deal, and I was in a group called the Live Wires, and we had a top 40 record called The Mask. You can see it on
Are
YouTube.
you kidding me? You were 15 years old and had a record deal?
15 years old.
This is
I was
insane.
In my, Jake, I'd have to preface this by telling you I went to 4 different high schools and got kicked out of 3 of them.
Yeah, so let's just be clear. You're a direct descendant from your father. It's obvious you were a madman at that point. So anyway, you were, but I mean, even then it was like, but I'm just saying, there was no pressure to like college degree, the music found you. So anyway, it was called this.
So music found me, but I'll tell you, and the guys who produced that record were 3 guys named Feldman, Goldstein, and Gotterer.
Oh, bless it all. God, we are firing on all cylinders right now.
Oh, dude, they were like, the cream of the crop. And what happened was, I was in that was one of the schools I was in, which was called the Professional Children's School, which also had guys like Yo-Yo Ma went there, but that's a whole other story.
Oh my God.
But when we got that record deal, it was because one of the kids in the school, they found me. I was came into that year to the school, and they found out, a couple of guys found out I could play guitar and noodle around on the piano a little bit, so I was asked to be in this band, the Live Wires. The leader of the band, the guy who put it together, was a guy named Dennis Kirby, whose father was a guy named Durward Kirby, who was on a TV show called The Gary Moore Show. It was a big TV show. And so he was wired and connected. So that's really how we got the deal. And then we had writers come in and write. We had a really good singer named Joey Kennedy, who's still around and singing in Miami somewhere. The record charted, and shortly thereafter, of course, as most rock and roll groups do, we broke up for whatever reason. And but I had tons of experiences in that time period in '65. And it's funny you mentioned Dino Danelli and Felix, because they were heroes. We would go see them at where was the name of the place? They played at they played in a few different places that you could go in if you were a minor, or they would sneak you in as a minor.
In the city? In the city?
Yeah, in the city.
Yeah.
And anyway, maybe I don't know, maybe 5 to 7 years later, I made recordings with Dino and Gene Cornish from the Rascals.
Wait a minute. Wait. You were up in Bearsville? What do you mean? What were you doing?
No. It was in New York. Let me give you like some bullet points.
Yeah, this is just set one, Ned. I mean, you're blowing my mind right now.
Well, so I got it. After the Live Wires, I hooked up with a girl who was writing. She was for the guy who wrote "Listen While I Play My Green Tambourine." Yeah, that guy.
It's out of my bag. Girl, yeah, keep going. Yeah.
Yeah, it was how small and how funny the world is. We wrote a song that those guys liked at Buddha Records and Kama Sutra Records, and they liked it, and they said, we want to cut a demo. So they brought in some players. That's how I met Hugh McCracken.
Oh, my God. Wait, hold on. Wait. You're blowing my mind right now. You were... And so, okay, anyway, Felix was on that demo? Is that what happened?
No. Those guys came later.
Okay.
After, But at any rate, I tell the story because that's how I met Hugh McCracken, who became a good friend and would come and sit in with me when I played club dates.
Oh my God!
Just for fun.
This is so sick. This is sick. Wait, was Murata sitting in because he just started playing drums at that point?
Yeah, at that point, Ricky Murata probably wasn't because he was younger. Huey was a little older.
And what about that? No, there's another guy. There's another guy, Hirsch, Jay Hirsch or something. Anyway, McCracken sat in with you. Go ahead. I don't mean to cut you off.
Okay, so Hugh McCracken was the guitar player on the date, and there was a couple other guys, and then they brought in a singer because they wanted a demo singer. Back in those days, you had a demo singer, and the guy that they brought in was a guy named Ron Dante. Well, Ron Dante became the voice on Sugar Sugar, which I worked on with. I worked on the Archies project with Jeff Barry, who produced that record. Hired me as a producer-songwriter, and later, and then I would cross paths with Ron Dante again. But we're talking about 15. I was 15 when I was doing that stuff, when I met those guys, and I was probably 18 when I started getting into real stuff like the Archies and the Monkees and tons of, we worked every day. We were in the studio all day, every day. And when we weren't in the studio, we were at our office writing. And that was my life for a number of years in my early times in New York.
You were at I'm sorry, you said you worked in the Brill Building, or what were the offices?
I did. Yeah, there were the offices, and we were up in, as auditioning tunes, and then I was in a group where the management had an office in the Brill Building, so we were up there working then. That was a group called Boys and Girls Together, and oh my God, we had.
Dude, how much of this is on? How much vinyl is available of this stuff? I need this vinyl immediately. I mean, don't be shy about it. Don't be coy about it. I need to know if there's any. I mean, because you're talking. Basically, this is the point: is that a lot of stuff. Correct me if I'm wrong, but a lot of the stuff from that time that you were working on, even though you were moving up in society economically, making some bread, you weren't necessarily getting accompanyist credits on those albums.
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I never really thought about it. For me, I was so happy that, I'll tell you the Jeff Barry story really quickly, because I like to say this to people. I'm probably I did this on one of the 4 high schools I went to. I've been to all the 50th reunions of most of the schools I went to. And I was thinking about that and, looking back on those times, I met so many people, but this is kind of I put it on one of these alumni things. I said, I'm probably the only guy that you'll meet who was deported from a Mexican prison and a year and a half later was singing on top 40 records.
Oh my! So wait! I'm sorry. You were in Mexico as a minor, or what year was this?
I was in Mexico when I was 17.
Oh my God! This is insane.
And I had been in a group. Everything was going shitty, and I was getting strung out on heroin and cocaine and all of the heavy drugs and acid and all that stuff. Because all going through that stuff. And they were, kind of like, oh, geez, what you doing? So, but they didn't know much about anything, but they thought, let's get him out of New York for a while. So they gave me a one-way freighter, a ticket on a freighter to Panama, and I took that down there, and they figured I'd be back in maybe like 3 weeks. That I'd make my, because he gave me $250.
I'm sorry, your pops did, or who did this?
My pop gave me
That's
$250
great.
and a one way.
one way. Wait, one way is so sick.
One freighter ticket to Panama, and then I had to $250 to work my way back up to New York. Well, I will tell you, and this is, it's a whole other tale with many tales attached. But nine months later, I was deported from a Mexican prison, taken out of the prison, and it's the same prison that housed El Chapo, by the way, but years later. But I was taken to the airport there in Mexico City and flown to Houston, Texas, and then I had, and by the way, I left with $250 in my pocket. When they deported me and they put me on the plane to Houston, I had $750 in my pocket. So
that was 9 months. Wait, did you actually commit a crime, or why did they put you in jail?
Yes, I was involved in trafficking some herbs.
Oh yeah, well okay, I dig.
And so that's how that happened. But it's just an odd twist in my life. I could have died in that prison.
Oh, dude, I know. Today, if that had happened to Ned Albright in 2020, we would never have heard from you again.
I know.
This is a miracle. This isn't. So you actually made profit in Mexico.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, I lived like a king in Mexico because I was moving weed within Mexico. There's an artist colony there named San Miguel de Allende. A lot of international and especially American artists that go down there to kind of live cheap and be able to make art, but they don't grow weed up there. And I had, in my travels, had been in Acapulco and Michoacan, places where they had really good weed. And so I had, was always kind of, getting involved in it. And all of a sudden I found myself trafficking. And eventually we did a very large deal. And that large deal came with federales who took me and, they fingerprinted Interpol shots. And the only thing that got me out was that I got a really bad case of amoebic dysentery right away in the prison.
Wow.
From drinking bad water.
Yeah.
And so I was sick from day one. And after 10 days, I had lost like 30 pounds, and I didn't have that to lose. And I was like a skeleton. And so I think they probably got scared and just get rid of them. So they deported me, and that was my lucky break. I could have sat there, indefinitely. But
you're telling I just want to be clear. I just want to be clear about something. There was no. Had you been able to communicate? Was there any pressure on them to do anything? I mean, they just were your parents involved, or was the embassy involved, or anything like that?
I don't think so. I think what had happened was there was a directive for the federales to pick up American kids that were, straggling around in Mexico, getting involved in pot deals. So they picked. I happened to be one, and I had gotten involved in a pretty large deal. So they had taken me to the prison, and I think that was sort of from what I heard, it was a roundup. But man, that prison was, I'm going to tell you, I was in two different prisons because they busted me in Michoacan. And by the way, to get back on the point, because I don't want to.
Yeah, that's fine.
That's a whole other story, which has.
Yeah, no, this is just set one, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, but so at any rate, while I was there, I had a headquarters in and he used the shack in the back to have these sort of Bible reading sessions with some younger guys in that were probably more close to my age, and they'd sit and read the Bible in Spanish, and then I would sit and play the guitar, and I slept back there, and I had guitar back there, and I would play. I'd write, play songs, write songs, and
Wow.
they liked hearing the music.
What town was this in?
It.
What town was this in?
This was in Morelia, in Michoacan, Mexico.
Wow. Okay, continue. Yeah.
Was a famous bandito state. It still is, kind of. But at any rate, I was back there, smoking weed and writing songs. Those songs, later, when I came back to New York, I was living in a crash pad with like 9 guys in a studio apartment in Manhattan on the Upper East Side. And when the bars closed, that was the party central. That was the after hours party spot. And to have a place to sleep, you just could, you found a place on the floor and you slept. But I would go into the bathroom and I'd play, the little echo and play songs. And a guy at one of these after hours parties heard me, and he came in and he goes, what's that you're playing? And I said, oh, it's just something I wrote. And he goes, why don't you be ready, and I will call you, and you have to be ready for whenever I call you. I'll pick you up and I'm going to take you down to the record plant, the studio, and I've got a friend there who will record you. And I said, oh, great. So we jumped in a cab one night. He called me. I was ready. Took me down there. We smoked a big chunk of hashish in the taxi cab. It was all loaded with smoke. The driver was getting happy. And we went down to the record plant. And one of the great engineers of all time, Jim Reeves, just an amazing recording engineer, who I later owned a studio with. But he and I, he said to me, what do you want to do? And I said, well, I have a few songs. And so he set up a mic, and I played live one take, 3 songs, each one take, and I finished them. And he said, do you play anything else? I said, well, I can play a little piano. He said, okay. He set a mic up on the piano, and I did the overdubs on 3 songs, one take each. No, we were out of there in less than an hour, I think. And he mixed it, and it sounded beautiful. And then the guy who took me there was a guy named JP, Jimmy Pullis, who had a famous nightclub in New York in the 70s and early 80s.
What was it? Was it Shining the Star? What was it called?
One was called JP's, was the club, and then he had another place called Trax, Trax. And Trax was kind of a bigger venue and bigger acts, and I did some stuff over there. But I started the music. My friend JP asked me to be the MD for what do you call it, the host for these acoustic shows. And we had everybody came in and played. Bonnie Raitt, Linda Ronstadt, James Taylor, Dave Mason, all of the big rock and roll acts. The people that played stadiums would play their gig and then come to our club and sit in.
Wow!
And just that was an amazing time.
You're talking about, and this is in the mid. This is like mid '70s.
Now we're in the mid '70s. But I'll tell you that the reason I talked about that was so JP at that time took me to right after that session, like the next day, he took me to a guy named Jeff to meet a guy named Jeff Barry. Well, Jeff Barry's a legend in the music industry and wrote 64 top 10 records. A group with Phil Spector and Ellie Greenwich, and then he's written hits with all sorts of different people. And he played this is how the record business worked back then, Jake. So it's a real contrast to what happens now. I made that demo. It took 45 minutes to make. I went to the guy the next day. He looked, and he said, who played piano on that track? And I said, that's me. And he said, okay. He says, I want to hire you as a producer-songwriter. I'm building a staff. You'll be working with other guys, but I want you to be part of our team. And that was it. We had a contract within a couple days, and I had to have my parents co-sign the contract because I wasn't of legal age. So
Wow. So
yeah.
I mean, Ned, you've been following my posts on Facebook, and some people still think that I'm cutting and pasting stuff from, I don't know, websites or things like that. But everything that I post is direct primary source content from interviews like this one. So we have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I'm going to put this in for you right now, and then we'll come back and break it down.
With Victoria Medlin was the girl's name.
Victoria Midland.
Medlin.
Medlin.
Yeah. And the band was called Ned the Head and the Terrible Tuners.
Oh my God, Ned! How did you get called for the date?
Well, I knew Ned.
Oh, you knew who? So what was Ned's full name? You remember that?
Albright.
Ned.
He's a friend of Rick Morotta.
Yeah, no, dude, Ned Albright. Dude, I can't.
Yeah.
Holy, so Ned Albright. So you knew Ned, or you had played with him before, and he's like, Charles, come to this. I'm doing a record date, or he's got this girl doing a record date.
Yeah, well, we had been doing gigs, with the Terrible Tuners, and things had gotten kind of slow. So he called us all up one day, said, "I got a recording session. Come down to the studio," and he said it's for the soundtrack of a porno movie.
Unbelievable.
Called "The Secret Dreams of Mona Q."
I love this.
And we went down there. We went to the studio, and we were waiting for Victoria to show up because she was going to sing the song. And she comes, and she had her aunt bring her down there. So she comes in the studio. She goes in the vocal booth, and the lyrics are on the music stand. She looks at the lyrics and comes, I can't sing this.
This is way better.
The title of the tune was, "I'm going to fuck you till you die."
I mean, this. and those
take her out to a coffee shop so she wouldn't be in the studio.
Ned Albright. Okay, so I think now you understand the magic of the Jake Feinberg show. That was, I know you know that is the greatest cat. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, he's one of my favorite people of all time.
Let
me just say, Jake.
Yeah.
I will tell you, I love what you do, and I think it's incredible what you're doing with people that, I feel, as far as I'm concerned, I've had a charmed life. I've had a great time, but everything that I should have done, I didn't do, and everything that I shouldn't have done, I did do. So, it was, I have a very colorful story, and no one knows me.
No, but Ned, this is the Jake Feinberg show is. This is where the rubber meets the road. I mean, I swear to you, this was from 2017 with the late great Cat. I never, the magic here is that most cats I've never met before, but when I did that intro with you today, I was being very serious because it's those stories that is really what it's all about for me. It's about, it is hysterical and classic, but it just speaks to a time in our culture when we were, at least music made sense. But I've been waiting to play that for you for 3 years.
Let me tell you, Charles Neville, was one of the great people I ever met. Charles had a story. Oh my God! And I could tell you Charles Neville's story.
You know what it is? I just want you to spend the next 10 minutes talking about Charles Neville. I need stories because the man, believe me, we vetted a lot of it. He went to Angola and for 2 joints, and he spent 2.5 years, and then he came to New York, and he was playing for women in cages at jazz clubs, and he found Tai Chi. But then ultimately, Ned the Head. I mean, it's just like, please talk about Charles Neville, his legacy, and your collaborations.
Well, I met Charles Neville. Now, I didn't know that I had met him years before, because when he was playing for the Girls in Cages,
Right.
I had my band at that time, which was called the King James Version. We were opening act for different people. One of them was a band named Tony something or other. I forget Tony's last name. Tony something and the Band of Gold. And
yes.
When I did meet Charles, when I thought it was the first time I met him, he said we started to swap tales, and he started telling me about this guy Tony, and I said, "Oh, we opened for Tony." He said, "Well, I was in that band."
Wow.
And so we kind of laughed about that. But it was, I'm trying to think the next time, I guess it was Ricky Murata or something, because I knew Ricky a little bit through Huey, because Huey McCracken and Ricky played a lot of those dates.
Well, no, this is the thing, is that they were in a band called the Riverboat Soul Band.
That sounds right.
The idea is that you guys were playing. Because I know, I mean, so the Kingsmen, you had actually been on the same bills as Charlie.
Yeah.
And I just want to be clear, like, because it's been a scattershot free for all on this one, but you wound up with Toussaint around this time in New Orleans, or
I tell you, it's a pretty good story, and I'll try to
break it down. No, break it down. Break it down.
Yeah. So here's how it went. So Charles, I probably was Ricky Murata, but somehow Charles wound up in the same room with me, and we talked about it, and he said, "Okay, let's, I guess maybe it was after I came back from Allan's. These stuff gets mixed up." So it may have been after I came back from the Toussaint experience. And by the way, when I came back from that being a year with Toussaint in New Orleans, all the big studio session guys in New York were like, "Hey, tell us about it." They wanted to know what was going on down there. How did they make those fucking incredible records, and they realized that if Allan Toussaint had, well, first Jeff Barry signed me, and then Allan Toussaint signed me. And I would say that I got to work with two of the greatest geniuses in the history of pop music. They were both, like, amazing. Allan was a musical genius who really would like to write symphonies. But he was, that's how he made his money, was writing those badass songs.
Oh my God, that's wait, are you telling me that he was a classical freak and he just, in his spare time, he was like, writing like "Get Out of My Life, Woman"?
Yeah, exactly. He was like, and I'll tell you something that people don't know, and you can't really describe it correctly, but Allan is a badass, and he played on all sorts of great records, producing, playing, arranging for horns. He did everything. But in the meantime, when I was with Allan, he'd call me up about once a week. He'd call me up to his office, which had a beautiful grand piano, small office, but it had a beautiful grand. And at that time, I just went, holy shit. I mean, I knew about all this stuff. I mean, the funny story about that one, and it'll kind of wind back around to Charles.
Yeah, no, wait, hold on. Was this C-Saint Studios? Is that what you're talking about?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, we were at C-Saint.
Oh, this is so insane, dude.
We reported for work every morning at 10 a.m. We would, play until lunch. They'd bring a gourmet catered, Allan had a woman who catered the meals for him. I've never eaten like that in my life.
Wait, hold on. I just want to be clear. The late, because I've just been shedding for so long. When I interviewed Uganda, he said that the late great Uganda, the Congo player, he said that woman would be bringing food. It was so home-like. It would make it the home atmosphere, you know.
Oh, it was like you were at some. Yes, it wasn't like, oh, let's unwrap our.
Yeah, Big Macs. Yeah, that's so sick.
We had gourmet cooking, real down home, red beans and rice. Oyster po' boys. It just went. You name it. Etouffees. She made everything, and she made it like it was a picnic for us at home. And it was amazing. We went every day, 10 to 1. Before we started at 10, Alan, we'd sit outside and everybody would drink a Heineken and pass a joint.
Wait, I'm sorry. At 10 a.m.
At 10 a.m.
This is a Heineken and a joint. Unbelievable.
Yeah. Now, that was not like my New York experiences, by the way. Our sessions were tight.
Yeah.
And there was a union guy there, making sure we got a coffee break every hour for 5 minutes, all that kind of stuff. In New Orleans, it was a whole other scene. So anyway, we'd play, and then we'd get what we got, and then we'd have that beautiful lunch, and then we'd play again, and then it would be dinner time, and the same lady would bring the amazing food, and we'd eat like kings. And then it was like maybe we'd play. Then maybe we would play after dinner to 11, midnight, something like that. And then I'd get in the car with George Porter, or because it was George on our dates. Oh my God, on our dates.
Oh my. Wait, no, it was Zig, George. I mean, was it just
George? Leo, George, Leo.
Was it Art? Was Art? So was it outside of the meters? Who else was in? Because I know Uganda played congas. Who else was there?
Well, and I'm like, my.
Yeah, I can't believe that this is the most. Hold on, you're telling me.
But you know who James Booker?
Of course, yeah.
Okay, so. James Booker was a legend, and we've kind of babysat for James because he was always in trouble. Also, I met Fess through Allan. I met Fess. That was the first time with Allan. I'll tell you the story quick. Victoria and I had written tunes every day for a month. And we wrote, and we had at the end of that time we had about 20 songs that we really liked. But we wrote every day, all day, and we got, after a month we had 20 songs, and we went down and got an audition with Toussaint through his lawyer, who was also Victoria's lawyer. And so we went down to New Orleans. We went for the audition. And we sat and played. Now, on an audition, for anybody who doesn't know, if you play 3 songs, they like you.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
If they let you get past. So we played 3 songs, and I said, okay, that'll be it. After each song, Toussaint didn't even break a smile or a frown. A total poker face. We'd finish the tune, and he'd say, "Do you have another?" And I'd tell. We played another. And this, Jake, I swear to you,
this is the greatest story. I mean, I got to be clear about something. So I just for chronology's sake, we're talking about 74-ish.
I think it was 70. It may have been 75.
Yeah, because here's the thing: the Secret Dream.
When was?
Yeah, the Secret Dreams of Mona Q was 75-ish.
Okay, so then, well, that's why I say they're all kind of, but
yeah. No, this is no. We really. No, I mean, like, I'm just trying to be clear. Like, did you? Because it seems to me like, I know Charles came up in the early '70s, and him and Aaron and Cyril had a band that used to play at Catch a Rising Star, but I would think that you would maybe you connected with Charlie after coming back from New Orleans. I could be wrong. When you really met him for
Yes. So and again, my dates are a little fuzzy, but I'll finish the tale because it's really kind of funny. And it's also just along the lines of what I said about Jeff Berry. I played for him 3 songs. Really, I didn't play for him. He heard my demo while I was sitting there, and offered me a deal right away. Then with Toussaint, we played. I swear to you, after every song he'd say, "Do you have another?" And nothing else. I didn't, whether he liked it or didn't like it. And we're sitting there and we're saying, like, we're singing our hearts out. We've worked so hard and written these songs. She's a big star on Broadway at the time, and in Hair, in the show Hair. And so we think, like, oh, this would be so perfect. This is just right. We're right up his alley. We love him. But he's not reacting to anything. And after 20 songs, he said, again, "Do you have another?" And I'd say, like, holy shit. So I looked up at him, and it was the first words I said. I said, "Nope, that's about it." And because I was stumped. I mean, I didn't know if he liked any of it or not, and it was weird. And then Vicky said to me, "What about that tune you wrote that you played for me the other day?" And I said, "Oh, I don't think you'll like that." And Allan said, "What's the title?" And I said, "It's called Bad Apples Make the Best Wine." And he said, and he didn't even say anything. He jumped up. All this, the first time I saw him get excited, he didn't even hear the tune. He just went to the studio and he said, he got the engineer and he said, "I want you to record this." And so she didn't know the tune. She just knew it because I played it for her. So he said, "Okay, yeah, just do the tune." So I played the song. They recorded it, and he said, and he heard it, and he said, "Come with me." We went up to his office, and he offered us a deal. Right then and there.
My. Wait, okay.
So
I just want to be clear, like, because this is blowing my mind. The only thing that comes up. Let me see here. Glenn, somehow you guys wound up, Glenn Campbell did an album called Southern, I know Toussaint did an album called Southern Nights, but here you are credited with a tune with Victoria from '77, and it's called How High Did We Go?
Yes.
Now that's the only thing that's coming up on, the World Wide Web. I mean, we're going to have to dig into this deeply. I mean, did he bring you in specifically for, like you weren't doing Meters albums. Maybe you were playing in that rhythm section, but like once he offered you the deal, were you?
The deal was Victoria was the artist. I was the songwriter.
Wow.
On the tunes that I wrote, of which I think we cut about maybe 9 or 10 things, and I was a co-writer of at least 5, probably 6. Yeah, I think it was probably 6. By the way, that record never saw the light of day. We worked on it for a year.
That is insane. That is insane. Every day Heineken in a joint for a year.
Back up to New York. The label was London Records, which no longer exists. But they had, the Stones were on London, I think, at some point. Anyway, we had a meeting with the president of the label, who had signed us, actually, Allan signed us, and then Allan placed it with London. So we had met the guy at London, and he calls us and he said, hey, why don't you and Victoria come and we'll have lunch? So we're there for lunch. He puts away a couple martinis and we're having lunch. and he says, I have some bad news for you guys. And I said, well, what? He said, well, the label is folding. It's closing. And I said to him, oh, gee, Walt, Walt McGuire was his name. I said, gee, Walt, that's really too bad. What are you going to do? He says, it won't affect me much. They're just moving me to the plastics division. I said, plastics? He said, plastics, records. To me, it's all just product.
Right.
Product. So anyway, it was kind of, and we were kind of, naturally, you can imagine, we were kind of crushed. Oh, like, wow, we just put in this record, and it's a really cool record, but boom, that was it. And, in those days, there were a lot of tax write-offs going on. The record business has always been a little, for lack of a better word, crooked.
Well, no, we listen, before we wrap up set one, because I actually need to spend a full hour with you on Charlie Neville. But I want to talk about this for a minute. Was this, I'm looking here at absolutely insane record that I've never seen in my life. Ned Albright, percussion, guitar, keyboards, vocals. Tally Jackson, David Capel, J. Stephen Souls, Tidbits.
Yeah.
1970. On the company called Family.
Yes.
I mean,
Family was.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Family was Artie Rip, and I don't know if you know who Artie Rip.
Maybe
is,
we'll save that for part. Maybe you know what? We'll get into. I mean, just tell me. Just talk a little bit overview about the legacy. Who Charlie Neville was. He was, to me, the most unique brother. It was such a drag for him and the cultural bias of the South. He came up to New York. He was playing with Fred Kemp. He was burning with the Baroness. He was a total bebopper, but really was a serious jazz cat. I just would love you to talk about his legacy.
Oh, Charles Neville was very serious. Like, he considered himself a jazz player. And but, you got to make a living. Hey, Charles did gigs with James Brown until it became too expensive, because if you clammed a note, James fined you. Mm-hmm. And so,
Jeez.
He would come home from a tour with, not making much money. But
every show he'd ding you if you clammed a note?
If you clammed a note, you got fined.
Oh, my God.
And it came out of your salary, and the salaries weren't all that big to start with.
Oh, my God.
So he left after a year. Bobby, okay, no, just that I can hear you. I'm on speaker. There he goes. My wife's running through there.
Yeah, no, she's like, what is going on here? Yeah.
What? Anyway, and she knows Charles. So she appreciates all Charles Neville stories. We love Charles Neville. Anyway, Charles was doing all that stuff, but I guess, the Catch a Rising Star was right next to JP's. And so there was a lot of interaction between the comedians at the club.
Richard Belzer, yep.
Bells was one of my best pals.
Dude, Ned, we can't. We have to. I'm interviewing Johnny Vidakovich right now. I gotta go. But dude.
Go.
No, I mean, Ned. Honestly, man, let's just do it as soon as possible, because I mean, we got the momentum going in the right direction here.
Jake, anytime you want, I'll.
My bearing. You blew my mind today. So let me just get my bearings, and then we'll do it again.
Yeah,
but.
Whatever you need to do, I'm sure you'll like some of the tales.
Dude, listen. You've already. I mean, this is this was just this made my day. So much love to you, brother, and we'll talk soon.
You made my day too, Jake. I love talking to you. I love what you do. Thanks so much.
All right, man. Talk to you soon, brother.
See you, man.
Later, dude. Bye.
Yep.
3 down, 1 to go. We'll be back on the Jake Fine.